Hi there and welcome to Startup Central. I'm Nayantara Rai. This is the only show of its kind dedicated, of course, to startups, technology, innovation, disruption. If it falls under the bracket of the new economy, it's here every weekday at 6 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, like the startups we feature on the show, Team Startup Central loves constructive feedback. Don't hold back. Keep writing into us. Tell us what you want to see on the show, how we can do things differently, what you don't like about it. We also like compliments. We lap it up, so you can send us those as well. Our email address right on top of your screens, suc@etnow.tv. I'm also on Twitter. You can reach out to me directly. Now, of course, you couldn't have had a bigger disruption than coronavirus. Now, having said that, one of the biggest trends we've seen, thanks to lockdown, is work from home. As work from home picks up and the jury's out on whether we are ever going to go back to our offices the way we're used to, what we've also seen is a rising trend of phishing, a rising trend of hacks. How can you prevent yourselves from being a victim of a cyber attack? What are the hacks against hacks? Pardon my pun over there, but I'm going to discuss that and a lot more today with my guest Saket Modi. He's the co-founder and CEO of one of India's most valued cybersecurity startup. Saket, thanks so much for joining us here on Startup Central. You know, we've been reading about ever since the lockdown began. I guess hackers have been very restless. It's also the perfect time, perhaps a paradise for them. How bad has it been when we talk about cybersecurity? Have you seen an alarmingly high level of cyber hacks?
Sure. First of all, Nayantara, it's always a pleasure to be with you on the show, and thank you so much for having me here. Before we jump into cybersecurity and the hacks that's going up, let's understand what's happening to cyber, and then we jump into cybersecurity, right? It's a very interesting stat which was actually which came out from an IDC report where the digital transformation services has actually, the forecast for the whole market has actually grown by almost 10.4% in this year to almost $1.3 trillion. We all know about work from home. Technology is the only way now in which, irrespective of your shape and size as a company, you have to adapt to, otherwise you will die. And when that's become an obvious thing which everybody is relying on, the hacks in that or disruption to technology is a business problem now. It's not just a back office problem with people in the back office trying to give you an antivirus and trying to interrupt you with the business that you're trying to do. And that is the reason why there's a huge upsurge in the kind of hacks which have been happening. In fact, according to a report from Subex, which came just in the last 3 months, there was almost a 46% increase in critical attacks on various kinds of smart devices around the world. Checkpoint said there has been almost 71% of the respondents during February and March reported that they've actually seen an increased number of attacks that have been happening on their network, on their endpoints which are there. In fact, Mimecast state, the report said that there has been almost 60% of the organization expect to suffer from an email-borne attack in the coming year, given the situation that everybody is in right now. So there's a huge surge in the attacks, and if you see not only hacktivists or not only smaller groups of people are trying to attack, but you actually have nation state or state sponsored activity which has started, and that's become a matter of concern with a lot of issues which are going on around the world.
You know, in fact, look at what Australia has said. Australia has actually said this, that its cyber world is under attack. But you know, the fact is, all of this happening on the dark web, we don't know who it really is behind it. And if companies are not able to protect themselves, how are nations doing it? We've also seen, you know, recent reports for the last 24 to 48 hours, which is a bit scary for India as well. There have been reports coming out how India is also under attack.
That's very correct, Nantara. Again, just think of it like this, right? When the thieves go wherever there's most money. Exactly in the same way in the world of hacking, when things have been now digitally transforming itself, hackers have been very, very active, and you now have new things like hacker as a service. You've heard of software as a service, you've heard of infrastructure as a service, now you've got hacker as a service, where you can go to the deep web and the dark web. Don't pay any money. Just give the target email ID or social media handle that you would want somebody to be, to be hacked into, and the hacker will actually come back to you in with screenshots or some kind of a proof that the person has been able to intrude into their account or the target's or the victim's account. And once you're convinced that yes, this is the real data, only then you actually go out and pay the money. It's almost like cash on delivery. And by the way, it doesn't end there. It actually goes to the next step, where they send you a survey form of how did you like their service, how would you like to rate them, and if you go ahead and share their coupons with your friends, you actually get 20% discount the next time you use them. So it's a pretty customer-centric industry that's coming out. Not so much in the deep web and dark web only, but now a lot of that happening in the clear web. You can find a lot of these results on Google itself, unfortunately. But there's an absolute surge in terms of the number of attacks that we are seeing on our customer side.
Okay, that's pretty innovative. So you've given us one idea and one instance of how they're doing it. Since we have you here, and the idea of getting you here was also to scream a big beware, watch out. What else has picked up, just so that people know what else is out there that they need to be really, really careful of?
Yeah, there's a famous Lao Tzu saying which says, "Know thy enemy." The reason I start from there is, right, when you say what's out there, the first question is obviously what's the kind of hackers, or what are the threat actors which are there. In general, if I were to break down the threat actors, Nayantara, it'll be, starting from data extortionists whose only intent would be data, till information brokers which go ahead and take the data and then exchange that in a lot of exchanges. Most of that would be used in marketing or targeted ads that would be coming to you. Crime facilitators, where you actually have a lot of physical crime, unfortunately, happening basis on the virtual information or the reconnaissance that is gathered. Digital robbers whose only intent is your wallet or your net banking username and password. Scammers which will scam you. We've seen so many frauds happening on UPI, etc., etc. And insiders, frankly, that's your own employees who have an access to certain data. And then the last sector would be really state-sponsored state actors, where you actually have a very structured program. There was a very famous Mandiant report a couple of years back, which actually highlighted very clearly the efforts of China, for example, which actually has an army of a few thousand people full-time deployed by the Chinese government, whose only intent is to go ahead and infiltrate into digital ecosystem of nation states on the other side, and get the data and use that to decision making, or diplomatic relationships, or even in war, if that need comes to there. So there are different kinds of threat actors with different kinds of motivations, and a lot of these people really have different degrees of acceptability of being caught. Unfortunately, cybersecurity or cyber crime is one of those businesses where the ratio of people who are caught for reported cybercrime is well less than 1%. So imagine a business model where the odds of your success can be more than 99%. That unfortunately is a very lucrative field for a lot of young techies and hackers, and therefore you see so many hacks, but you see so little news around who was caught for everything that goes wrong out there. So those are the kind of things which we are seeing in the deep web, dark web, and at the same time with our customers, that there's a surge, especially for more structured, more financed, well thought through attacks, to large enterprises, which at the end of the day even affect individuals, because those all enterprises are at the end of the day serving customers, and most of them now online. So that's what we are seeing, Nayantara.
So I take that point, and in fact, it's structured. You obviously don't know, but then how are you supposed to stay ahead of the hackers, right? Because that's what they do 24/7. Try to figure it out. It's perhaps a thrill for them, an addiction for them. So how are startups, entrepreneurs or just regular folks supposed to stay ahead of that? What would you have any pro tips for anyone who's tuning in?
Absolutely. And I think the common tip for organizations or individuals is to start with assuming everything is already hacked. And I'll explain what this means. When you put an email thinking that it is only intended for a recipient and it'll never come out, when you click a picture and send somebody, when you have you're giving away your password to your friends, assuming it'll only stick to them and nothing's going to go wrong. I think that's where the awareness becomes a problem. The next problem that most individuals or most companies have, they don't have a metric to really being able to see how secured are you really. So if I asked you a simple question, Nantara, how secured or how much battery is there on your cell phone, you have a real-time objective answer saying, Saket, I have 73% battery. And if you click on the battery, it actually tells you how much battery is being utilized with what apps. But if I asked you how secured is your smartphone, or are you smart enough to use your smartphone, is it secured enough? You don't have an objective number out there. And that's where you can go ahead and trying to get to a metric for an organization or for an individual and trying to see, look, this is how secured I am. And most companies are going towards that enterprise cyber risk quantification space, where you need to start by saying, what is my body temperature right now? And then you say whether I have fever or not. Exactly in the same way, how secured am I as a company? Even it's good or bad. And then you go, okay, from here, if I have to go somewhere, what can that journey be like? So awareness, and then having quantitative metrics, which is based on real signals of cybersecurity sensors in your network, in your phones, in your laptops, all adding up to give you a simple to understand metric, is where we are seeing the world is moving towards. And there's a huge uptick for most companies for solutions like this.
Okay, and what about password authenticators? One has been hearing a lot about that.
Yeah. So password authenticators, in other words, multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, I would say it reduces the likelihood of an account takeover or an account breach by more than 90%. So I highly, highly recommend every person out there to enable two-factor authentication on your Gmail or your Yahoo, on your email or your social media, or any kind of an account, frankly, because that really is a game changer in terms of adding a new dimension of security. But is it that if you have two-factor, you cannot be hacked? Unfortunately, that's not true. It does take the likelihood of the breach down, but there is still a likelihood, and there are still ways to breach into you. But that can be an acceptable part of the risk which is there.
Can you share with us what are good authenticators to get?
Yeah, there are a lot of free of cost ones. Like if you have an Apple system, you have something called Keychain. There's a very good authenticator called LastPass. There's another very popular one which I've seen a lot of people use free of cost is on your browser, where you can actually store a lot of those credentials. For two-factor, you can actually just download the Google Authenticator, which basically enables you, or you can take a screenshot. You can read the QR code. So for the first factor authentication, which is your password, you want complex passwords being stored in password managers. For the second factor authentication, you can either use an SMS way, but that can be sometimes unreliable if you don't have network or coverage. I recommend a mobile application called Google Authenticator, free of cost. Download that, and you actually get a code which stays for a few seconds, and you can use that code to put in your second factor authentication to actually being able to log in, and which works without a cell phone connectivity or even an internet.
I'll make this my last question, Saket, because we're also running out of time. Now, if the hackers are having a field day and the lockdown and work from home situation is their paradise, I'm sure it's good for business for those in cybersecurity like yourselves.
That is correct, Nantara. In fact, when we were going into the COVID time, we had actually expected that we'll have some very slow traction because the cash flow would stop, et cetera, et cetera. I'm still a few days to go away from my quarter. It looks like we'll have the best quarter we've ever had in the history of our company. Cash flow still remains a problem because cash nobody wants to pay right now. But in terms of order bookings, it actually looks very good.
Okay, so are you going to go into fundraise? Is that possible?
Well, the good part is we are fundraising with our customers paying us. So I think that's the number one way by which an enterprise customer company should look at fundraising. We based on that, there's a lot of interest from investors because they want to be investing in a sector which they know in the post-COVID era will be very, very relevant, and cybersecurity definitely is one of those sectors. So definitely good, good time. We will see based on variables and parameters whether we go with the fundraise or not anytime soon. But as of now, business looks very, very healthy, and we are actually growing in triple digit, literally quarter on quarter.
Okay, Saket, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Startup Central, and more importantly, for sharing and being so candid about the various hacks against hacks. Look forward to another interview with you soon in the future.
Likewise, thank you for having me here, Nayantara. Bye bye.